And welcome in, everybody. Another edition here of the Auburn Undercover Podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. My name is Nathan King. I am joined today as we are getting started with a new podcast series by our publisher, Ronnie Sanders, and our senior writer, senior editor, Phillip Marshall. As this is Fridays with Phillip, we are going to try to get these out as consistently as possible for you guys to dive into Phillip's treasure trove of stories and knowledge and information and everything you can sort of expect from the dean of Auburn sports. And Phillip, we're excited to get this thing rolling with you.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm not the world's greatest podcaster, but I have been around a long time, so real long time. So we'll see where it goes. I'm looking forward to it.
So are we.
Well, you never know. Maybe this podcast will land us a head coaching job, because apparently that's what you can do in the NBA nowadays. So y'all just send out your clips, and we'll see where it gets us. But Ronnie, we wanted to kind of dive into a number of topics here, and we'll just sort of see where it goes. If you wanted to kind of get us started,
sure. Phil, how are things different today? Kind of start about that. I mean, we've been doing this, 55 years, something like that?
Be 55 years on October the 5th.
You got a better memory than I do.
Huh?
You have a better memory than I do.
I don't know about that. I can remember stuff from 55 years ago sometimes better than I can remember from 55 minutes ago. But, it is different. There's no question in a lot of ways, and I'll get to the obvious ones of all the stuff that's going on now. But the first game I covered was Auburn in Florida in 1968. The first college game I covered was Auburn 69. Auburn, Florida in 1969, and John Reed threw 9 interceptions, which is still the national record for interceptions in a game. And they actually had 10, but one of them got called back by a penalty. And Auburn just beat the heck out of them. And it turned out Pat Sullivan and John Reed ended up breaking the national record at the time for passing yards. And Auburn and Pat Sullivan beat him 38-12, 63-14 in Gainesville, and 41-7. So that was kind of and I do remember those scores. I'll admit that's pretty good. But it was different in a lot of ways. I mean, offensive linemen had to keep their hands to their chest, and if you didn't, it was called illegal use of hands. If you didn't hold, but if you used your hands, it was called illegal use of hands, and that went on. It was that way until the 1980s, and they first changed it to that you could use your hands. Receivers could use their hands, basically. And then eventually it changed where everybody could use their hands. Can you imagine trying to block today's edge rushers with you like that? Be pretty hard to do.
I'd rather not. I'd rather not try
that. But the old coaches didn't like it. Bryant called it legalized holding. Coach Jordan didn't like it. None of them liked it. But obviously that changed the game. And I think the other thing that really changed the game and led to some of the stuff that we've got going on now is the 1984 Supreme Court decision. It was technically Georgia and Oklahoma challenged the NCAA's rights to control TV, but it really wasn't just Georgia and Oklahoma. They were just the two that. I mean, it was. They had. I don't know if you wouldn't remember because you're too young, but they started this thing called the College Football Association, the CFA. That kind of faded away after this, but they That's what Georgia and Oklahoma were basically representing the College Football Association. And when the Supreme Court said that the schools could control their own TV rights, well, then they quickly turned those rights over to the conference. So, and then we started toward what we have today. It wasn't as much then than it is now, but before that, I mean, when I was growing up, you couldn't be on TV more than twice a year, and they'd usually just have one game on Saturday, and that was it.
I do remember
Sometimes
that.
they'd have to do what?
I am old enough to remember that.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's what, but it was very limited.
Yeah, and but obviously that changed, and it's funny because there was much doom and gloom about that too, and that people are not going to keep coming now. But I think it had the opposite effect. I think it really, really energized the game, and people could watch other teams, not just their teams. Because it used to be they would have you could watch the coaches shows like Auburn Football Review with Coach Jordan and Phil Snow and Carl. You're so right, Carl. But and then on Monday Night Football at halftime, they had highlights, college football highlights from the Saturday before that, and that was really about it. That was, and it's funny if you go back on YouTube, you get them and watch some of those old Auburn football reviews. They made it so they showed every single play of the game in an hour, and so it was like really fast. I mean, the tape was really fast, and it was live.
Wow,
it was live. So that obviously was different. One thing that was very different was there was no. There were very few rules about practice. I mean, if you wanted to put on pads every day, you put on pads every day. Did whatever you want to practice as long as you wanted to. Even when I got there, if he got mad, he'd say, "Go back to period one. We're starting over." And they'd go back to period one and start over.
I do remember those days. I remember 3 days too.
Yep. Now, when I was in high school, you didn't get water. You got salt tablets, which, of course, was the opposite effect of what you want to have. It's amazing more people didn't die. But that they were getting water by the time I started covering college football. But it was much more brutal. And, and if they got what players got today, they would have thought they were they would have thought they were in heaven. They got $15 a month laundry money. That's it.
That's pretty amazing.
And Tom Gosson, Tom Gosson, Ronnie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He told me the story. He said after he finished playing that next semester, he was finishing school. Coach Jordan had a strict rule about no facial hair. No facial hair, no hair below your collar, all this kind of stuff. And I don't know what he would have thought of tattoos. Probably not much. But he Tom after he finished playing grew a mustache, just a regular mustache, and he went to pick up his $15 laundry money, and they said, "Nope. Coach Jordan says you got to shave that mustache, or you can't get it." And so he had to go home and shave his mustache off to get his $15, which was, to be fair, a lot more then than it is now, but still. And but it was very different, and it's funny because at the time, one of the few rules was you had 2 practice opportunities a day. you were considered to have 2 practice opportunities a day up until the week of your first game, and only a certain number of practices total, which was a real detriment to Auburn because Auburn was on the quarter system and school didn't start until the middle of September. And so Auburn had 2 practice opportunities a day. So they couldn't start when other people on the semester system started because their school started sooner. And Coach Jordan used to complain about it all the time, and I think with good reason. So, I mean, it was 2 days every day. And then when Di got there, like he said, it was 3 days or even 4 days. And it was not for the faint of heart.
Sounds like a rough time.
Yeah, it was. If you're a player, it was. But
I'm guessing
the funny thing about that to me, Ronnie, with all the stuff going on now, I have never talked to a player from those times who doesn't cherish what he went through, and believes that it made him a better person, better man, whatever you want to call it. That sounds corny, but it's true. I will tell you one more story. Sewell Hall, which was the athletic forum, had like on it was several, three floors maybe. I don't remember, but the halls were like all concrete. You went from the outside into your room. And anyway,
I remember him well. I lived there. I remember it well. I lived there for a while.
Oh yeah. Well, you'll understand this then. They had this group they called the Sewell Hall Maple Leafs, and they would get up there on the top floor, and they had hockey sticks, and they had a hockey puck, and they wore like rolled up cardboard for shin guards, and they played hockey with concrete walls on every side. It was dark, and that day it was. I was afraid somebody's going to get killed. And like I said, they called themselves the Sewell Hall Maple Leafs. And I wrote something about that a couple of years ago, maybe. And Brownie Flanoy was the dorm counselor. He was a live-in dorm guy. And his daughter saw it and went on Twitter and said that just simply was not true. It wouldn't have been true. Her daddy would have known about it, and he would not have let that happen. And I sent her a message. I said, look, all I can tell you is, 1, I don't think he did know about it. And 2, I'm not thinking it happened or guessing it happened. I watched it myself. I'm telling you, that's what they did. And, but yeah, it was more of a, it was a different kind of day.
Yeah, I've been around as long as you are, but it was very different when I was coming up too, than it is now.
Yeah.
I mean,
heck, it was different 3 years ago in a lot of ways. I mean, for all my years doing this, I would never, ever have imagined that we would ever get to the point where we are right now.
No.
I would never have imagined that. And I wrote it before this, and I still say it. I think it puts the entire enterprise at risk. I really do. For one thing, there's this thought out there that Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, Florida, Ohio State, whoever, that they've just got this huge bucket of money sitting over here, and they just reach over there and grab them some. And that really isn't true at all. And that's why what we're going to see, I'm afraid, is reduced opportunities, because I think football rosters will probably be reduced. I think, and it'll depend on the school or the conference, I guess, but I think you're going to see some non-revenue sports either go away or be something totally different, almost like a club sport. And the thing that baffles me is they said they may cut out walk-ons. I don't really get that. That doesn't seem like much of an expense in a $200 million budget. But there's a lot of ADs worried about how they're going to handle this, because you got to pay your share of the settlement money, and you can pay up to $22 million to players, and you don't have to, but you can. And if you're in the SEC and you want to compete, that's what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be very, very interesting to watch. And then, of course, who knows what the next lawsuit will be. If the 1983 North Carolina State basketball team can file a lawsuit because they haven't been compensated for videos of something that happened publicly, then I don't know. That's there's a lot of people out there. The NCAA is vulnerable, and there's a lot of lawyers, agents, whatever out there circling around trying to get their share.
Speaking of the money situation, what do you think about the news that came out today about Conference USA and the Big 12 selling the names of the rights to name the conference?
Well, I said in my musings Thursday afternoon, it's you're selling to me, they're selling their soul. I mean, it's just another sign that money is all that really matters here. And I think it's unfortunate. I mean, if it happens, and if it doesn't happen there, it'll probably happen somewhere. The Conference USA, to be honest with you, I can understand Conference USA better than the Big 12. They're just trying to stay afloat. But I won't like it. But whereas I don't mind if they said you can put stuff, like advertisements on the field. I'm okay with that. And I'm okay if they wear some kind of patch. But doing that, I just, and also in that same thing is that they're talking about private equity, which I think, and I know nothing about high financial matters. If you could talk them into paying me more, I might be able to learn more about it. But I think that's very dangerous, because they're not doing it because they love college football and want to help you out. They're doing it because they think they're going to get some of your money, a lot of your money. So you don't know, and and even with the $22 million to pay players sounds good, but it's not like there's not going to be. I mean, already I've been reading stories about, some of these, the whole collective thing got out of control in a hurry, and they're not going away, and they better not try to make it, or they'll be back in court. And not only that, then you got Title IX, and how does that fit into all this? I'm not smart enough to know, but it's I would say I'm glad I'm not an athletic director, but they make lots of money, so maybe I wish I was. But but no, seriously, I feel bad for them, because they got almost unsolvable problem to figure out what to do.
Considering the ban at Auburn, and I'm assuming several other places, about naming, corporate naming on campus, does that affect anything as far as advertisements on the field or anything like that?
I don't know that they've gotten there. I talked to somebody today who is a former yesterday, who is a former trustee, and he said he laughed, and he said it was a big showdown about whether we would allow advertising signage in the stadium. He said a lot of people didn't want to do that. He said, now you're talking about this, and but I do think everybody understands that this is a different time, and you got to do what you can. And if everybody starts doing it, you can't be the one that doesn't do it and fall behind. And I don't know how much you get for doing that, but I would not think it'd be a problem in Auburn. or anywhere else. And I'm sure there's a lot of schools in the past have been like Auburn as far as that goes, but I don't see anybody tell them they can't. One thing, they got a president now that understands, and I was talking, that same person I was talking to today, I said, there seems to be more of a healthy connection between the president and the AD and the board of trustees now than there ever has been. And he said, absolutely, there's no question about it. And he gave most of the credit to Chris Roberts.
Well, and it's taken long enough.
Yeah, it really has. It's I don't know if I want to use the word ridiculous, but
I will.
Auburn has. It's amazing in many ways how much Auburn has succeeded in spite of itself, because it's just been such a constant thing, and the attitude of some Auburn fans doesn't help either. And but I do believe that right now it's different. Will it stay different? We'll see. But I do believe it is. It was not ever going to be different. I mean, the hiring of Brian Harsin was just so wrong and so bad in so many ways. I mean, he was. It would not have been hard if you do any homework at all to talk to people at Boise or wherever and realize this is not the guy we need. But they did none of that. All kinds of people were mad at each other. Alan Green was mad because he was left out of the decision to fire Malzahn. And then they were, a lot of people say, well, they should have had a plan. Well, in fact, they did have a plan. The plan was to hire Kevin Steele. Literally that same day, on Sunday, that Malzahn was fired. And I don't know how many games he would have won, but I do know that Auburn football would have been in a much better place with him than with Brian Harsin. And he make a decision like that, and it's just hard to overcome. And and if well, a trustee at the time told me, he said, if we'd known this was going to happen, we wouldn't have gone along with firing Malzahn, because it makes us look like a bunch of idiots. Mm-hmm. And it did. And,
to expand on that, Phillip, kind of walk us through, where did Auburn get off course? It sounds like everything's, much better now. I think it is. But
that's a good question. I think, they were more united than ever before when Dye was here, and when Bobby Louder was on the board and told the president what to do. I mean, they were much more united then than they are now, or than they have been. But then, Terry became a kind of a problem in his last couple of years, which was unfortunate. And as a result, he'll never really get the credit that he deserves. I mean, the man won his first 20 games. And
he took over a program that was really
that had a losing season and a break-even season the previous two seasons,
and on probation.
And exactly, and on probation, couldn't be on TV, which that's something else that I don't think that'll ever happen again, that somebody be barred from TV, because it ends up costing other people money too. But so then that happened, and then they just made a series of not very smart moves. I don't, when they hired Tuberville, then he came into a not very good situation, and was very fortunate in that after Alabama won the SEC championship his first season, and then after that they just went into a straight nosedive with NCAA issues and all that kind of stuff, and as a result, Tommy was able to recruit at a level that probably he couldn't have. I mean, Cadillac Williams was an Alabama fan his whole life. Would he have come to Auburn if Nick Saban had been the head coach at Alabama? I mean, he'd probably tell you he would have, but I wouldn't believe it. And but I think and so then the board of trustees had at that time been somewhat neutered, but then the whole Jetgate thing happened, and I told Tuberville myself, I said, if you can't put this behind you and move on, then you just need to tell them to give you your money and leave. And he said, "Oh, I can," but he never did. He never did. He the people he was mad at, he never patched things up with. And so then the whole Chiswick thing, and it's hard to say he was a bad hire. He won a national championship, but it was bad other than that. And I think Gus probably deserves more credit than he gets too. I mean, no, I know he didn't win 3 or 4 championships, and probably the biggest mistake he made was winning the SEC his first year, because then everybody thought it was supposed to happen every year. And of course that was another point of contention, and then Harsin, and but they just what they haven't had. And I love Alan Green. He is a great guy, but he came here. Leath hired him because Leath wanted to make the big decisions in the athletic, and Alan knew that, and he was okay with it. And then Leath leaves, gets fired, and
Phil, back up a little bit and tell us about Leath and that whole situation, how he ended up on campus.
Well, it was
Former president, for those who.
Yeah, former President Stephen Leath. He was the president at Iowa State and was about to get fired there for using the school plane improperly and stuff like that. And but Raymond Harbert was the chairman of when Dr. Gouge retired the first time. Raymond Harbert was the chairman of the search committee for the president, and presidential searches are a lot different than coach searches. And the chairman of that committee has a whole lot of power, and I'm not sure why Raymond Harbert wanted Leath, but he certainly did and pushed it through and got it done. And I knew, just like I knew at Brian Harsin's introductory press conference that he had no clue what he was getting into. And I don't think I knew when Stephen Leath was sending out signals that he wanted to fire Bruce Pearl. I knew he didn't get it either. But and then the whole Gus Malzahn thing, and I have it on. This didn't come from Stephen Leath or Gus Malzahn, but I believe very strongly it's true. When Jimmy Sexton went to negotiate Malzahn's contract, negotiated an extension during the 2017 season. But it was after it was after they had beaten Georgia and Alabama. And So Sexton goes in there and he just throws this number out. And from what I'm told, without any idea that they would go along with it. $7 million a year, fully guaranteed. And Leath said, well, I don't know about the guarantee part. He said, how about $7 million a year for 7 years and 3/4 of it guaranteed? Sexton said, sounds good to me. That's really, and after they got beat in the SEC championship game, Sexton in the locker room told Malzahn, because they had not yet signed the deal, they were supposed to sign it next week, told Malzahn in the locker room that they're probably going to back off that. They're probably not going to do that now after this game. But on, I think, Tuesday after the game, they called Sexton and said, we're ready. And there it was. And that made Gus rich, but it hurt him in the eyes of Auburn people. It really did. And I'm not saying that's fair. Hey, they offer it to you, take it. But, you know, they were scared, or Leath was scared, that he would go to Arkansas. Well, he wasn't going to Arkansas. He was never going to Arkansas. He didn't want to go to Arkansas. His goal was always been to win it all, and he didn't think you could do that in Arkansas. But he played it for all it was worth.
Well, and since 1992, they haven't won a conference championship, much less won a national championship. So
right. But you know, all those things kind of combined, and going back to when Terry left, and in the school paper and the local paper, columnist guy named Paul Davis, who's dead now, just went berserk. And then I went to my one and only university senate meeting because they were going to have a no confidence vote for Walker, like because they're related to all this stuff. And and I sat there in that meeting and I said, man, where are all these people from? But Paul Davis, the columnist, was sitting right in front of me. And he turned around and looked at me and he said, why haven't you written that they had a contract when they met with Petrino in wherever it was they met in Indiana? And I said, well, Paul, because I don't know that to be true. Yeah, you know. I said, no, I don't know. I don't know that. And so that was kind of the atmosphere. And I got really honestly sucked into it personally. And it's one of the strangest things that's happened to me in my career. I was, during that season, my perception was that there was a lot of unhappiness with Terry. So I called actually three people, but one who was in a particularly strong position. And it turns out I was right. And I told this person, I said, well, I'm going to write this. And he said, that's fine. But what I wrote was that if things didn't turn around, there was a good chance he was going to be in trouble at the end of the season. Well, Terry will believe until the day he dies that was a plant by Bobby Louder. And the fact of the matter is, who I called purely on my own. Nobody called me and said, hey, why don't you write this? Well, when I wrote it, all hell broke loose. And we finished that weekend. Actually, before I wrote it, I was trying to talk to Terry, who had never been a problem to talk to. Heck, I could go to his house and talk to him. But we were where we used to have the post game, which was where Tigers Unlimited is now. They had that little lounge. Remember that? Right there overlooking the practice field.
Sure.
Well, that's where we did the post-game meeting with the coach, which Nathan was every practice, by the way. We talked to the coach after every practice.
It's not today, right?
A little different than now, isn't it? But anyway, after it was finished, Terry was starting to walk down the stairs. And I said, Terry, I need to talk to you. And he said, Phillip, if it's not positive, I don't want to hear it. I said, well, Terry, I'm telling you, you need to hear it. He said, if it's not positive, I don't want to hear it. And he went on down. I said, okay. And then, by the end of that week, he was done. And I think that he did some things to besmirch his own how he's remembered, and that he didn't really, and except for a few players, he just really didn't have much of a relationship with his players. Sometimes couldn't even remember their names, and it was just a and the fact is, and y'all, I know y'all are friends, and I like Terry a lot too. But the fact is, he likes to say he got fired, but he didn't. He left because he chose to leave. He could have stayed till the end of the season, and he chose not to. And a lot of his players thought he walked out on them, and it's hard to argue with that. So, like I said, lack of leadership is the biggest issue, and but I don't think Harsin was. Definitely Leath was not a strong leader. Good was not a strong leader, at least not when it comes to athletics. A lot of people tell me he did a really good job of other stuff. When it came to athletics, he wouldn't make decisions. Jay Jacobs, longtime friend of mine. When I wrote a story about him when he was a player, his mama sent me a big old thing of cookies. So send me cookies, you got me. But he couldn't make a decision. He had to have committees do everything. David Hauser was the same way. And it just it was just never a smooth running operation until now.
You're running.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Phillip. I was gonna say you're running. Running through a lot of. Sorry. I was gonna say you're running through a lot of. We've run through a lot of coaches over the last 20, 25 minutes or so. You've covered a bunch of coaching searches and turnover. What would you say is sort of the most incorrect misconceptions that you hear from other people about what is entailed with a major coaching search, whether it be football or basketball or even, the one softball just wrapped up?
Well, I think a few things. One is that if you do it right, which was not done right with Brian Harsin, but if you do it right, then you do enough research and vetting to know, just to start with, well, this guy fit in well at Auburn or wherever it is, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, wherever. Is this the guy? This the kind of guy we want running our program. And then you go from there. And it's not, if the season's going on, you talk to agents. You can talk to agents, but no coach is going to talk to you. And it always laugh when they say that some sitting head coach and the people want you to hire, and that his wife was in town looking for real estate or whatever. But that's never true. And so and John Cohen is more diligent than most on the betting stuff. I mean, he has a long, several pages of questions that he asks every single coach he interviews. but then you got to know, one is you got to understand, and the fans don't understand this, that it's real hard to hire a coach who has proved he can win at this level. That's a head coach has proved he can win at this level. It's very difficult. And because if a guy's secure and he's making $8 million a year, he's probably not going to get his head turned by $10 million a year. And so
Or he'll get $10 million where he is.
Do what?
Or he'll get another $2 million raise where he is.
Yeah, right, exactly. And you have to know, try to know when you're getting used, for what Ronnie just said about this guy really want the job, or is he just trying to get a raise where he is? And ADs panic real easy, and if he makes his AD believe he's considering it, and the AD likes him, he'll probably get his raise every time. And but then you got to, okay, so if you can go out and hire, if you could go hire Tennessee's coach or somebody like that, then you say, well, there's a real good chance that guy's going to succeed. But you probably can't do that, and unless you're willing to do like what LSU has done and just basically say, tell me how much you want, and that's what we'll give you. And that's never been the Auburn way. So, and it's a subjective situation. Okay, can this guy do it? Well, you have to do all the research you can do to convince yourself that he can or he can't. And when he arrives, maybe he can, maybe he can't. But there things I would suggest ADs avoid. Don't hire a coach like Gene Chizik, who's on a 10-game losing streak, and most of those games were like 50-14. That's probably not a good idea. Don't hire Brian Harsin just because he's Brian Harsin. And I actually have this column written. I don't know if I'm ever going to use it, but there are all my years have covered Auburn sports or Alabama sports either, for that matter. There are only I can only think of 3 coaches that were just downright disagreeable, and that's Harsin and Sonny Galloway and Tony Barbie. And being that kind of a guy is not going to work at Auburn.
No,
it's just not. And that's not, and I guess you could say, well, it'll work if he wins. Well, maybe so, but that kind of guy is probably not going to win at Auburn. So, as all 3 of those guys proved. So, Sonny Galloway summoned me to his office to complain about that I was writing too much negative things about baseball. And I told him that if I was writing negative stuff, it was because the truth was negative. And we go through this for an hour. He's got Scott Foxhall, who's now back at Auburn, who's the pitching coach in there, and Scott Duvall, who was the ops guy, one of the best guys you'll ever meet. And he makes them sit through it and just for an hour, nonstop. And then finally he says, well, I can see we're not going to agree on this. No, we're not. And I left, and he told, according to both of them, he told both Scotts, that if I catch you talking to Phillip Marshall, I'm going to fire your ass. That's the kind of guy he was. So, and Barbie.
And it wasn't long after that he was gone.
Yep. Barbie, Barbie never, he was always nice enough to me. but he just, I mean, he didn't. I don't know. Barbie and Harsin both have one thing in common. I don't know why they came to Auburn. Not only should Auburn have known better, they should have known better. That they were not now, and I'm sure money probably had something to do with it. But Barbie was the first time I ever talked one-on-one with Barbie. I walked to his office, and his right-hand man, Smitty, was sitting there, and I said, "I've got an appointment with Coach Barbie. I'm Phillip Marshall," and he said, "Yeah, I've been looking into you." I said, "Really?" I said, "That was probably pretty boring." And so I go in to see Barbie, and I sit down, and he looks at me, and he says, "Can you believe this office furniture?" I mean, office furniture looked fine to me. but it was obvious as I talked to him, he was not happy about the fact that Auburn actually had academic requirements for people to get into school. And they, you can get people in school just like you can now, but they had to have some semblance of being able to get into school. And the guy he was talking, there was a big time prospect that year. The guy he was talking to, and he had no semblance, and he couldn't get in anywhere, as it turned out, nowhere. So but for the most part, I think the key to hiring a good coach is one, obviously his skill level, and two is can he sell the program, which is absolutely crucial at this level. Can he make people want to give their money? And can he win? And you don't really know the answer to any of those questions until somebody gets here. So you just have to do the best you can.
Let me ask you, I got a couple of follow-ups. We talked a little bit, and this kind of jumping back, but we talked about the issues, with leadership, those kinds of things. How much was, as much as Pat and I did for Auburn, and Auburn people will always appreciate that. How much was he a detriment after he was no longer coaching and the athletic director?
I think he became a detriment to Terry. I'm not sure he was a detriment to anybody else. I mean, he got on the radio and openly second guessed Terry. I never really heard him do that with the rest of them. And but I don't think there's any doubt he was a detriment to Terry. And but this is kind of changing the subject too. But I'll tell you a Coach Dye story. Auburn's baseball team was getting ready to go to the regional, and I was out there at practice, and I was sitting in the third base dugout. Well, Coach Dye's a big baseball fan. He loved baseball, and he drives up in his truck to come watch practice. Well, Auburn had a guy named Edouard Julian, who's now in the big leagues. And Coach Dye saw him standing there, like getting ready to go to the batting cage. And he goes out there and he talks to him. I see him talking to him and gesturing and stuff. And then he comes back and sits down. And I can hear what Julian's saying to whoever the other player was. And he said, "I'm not going to be scared this weekend." And the other player says, "Were you scared last weekend?" He said, "No, but he said I was." But I don't believe beyond that. I think now the whole Tuberville at the end. I mean, I think a lot of Terry's assistants, I'm not Tuberville, excuse me, resented a lot of Tuberville's assistants resented Dye a little bit or a lot. and they. But other than that, I'll just say this: I think there were obviously, and heck, this goes back to when he was coaching. There were a lot of times with Coach Dye when I thought I don't believe I would have said that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think for the most part, he was much more positive than negative.
We were talking just a second ago, Phillip, about those coaching hires. I don't know when you're planning to release anything with it, but we were talking before you got rolling about your interview with one of Auburn's new softball coaches. Just kind of tell us a little bit about your impressions of not only just that interview and just talking to him, but that hire overall, because I think it was just an interesting thing to make that decision for a coaching hire.
Yeah, and yes, I did talk to him. The story be up Friday. First, he was very impressive guy to talk to, and he is really fired up about being at Auburn, and I thought some of what he said was very interesting. Don't want to scoop myself here, but he and I think that the co-head coaches thing, and this is just the impression I get from talking to him, and from what other people who have talked to him, I guess, be the best way to put it. I think it's it's the way he wanted it, and I think they have a plan, at least a good bit of which is her doing some of the administrative stuff that normally is all on the ops director. But having said that, I do believe she'll be involved in coaching too, and but I believe he will be the on the field practice, etc. coach, decision maker. I believe it'll be him. That's what I believe. I could be wrong, but that's what I believe. And obviously, John Cohen is a really smart guy, and I'm sure he had to be convinced that it would work. But this guy, he's very, very highly thought of, and he was considered somebody that was going to be a head coach soon. I don't believe there's any question that Auburn went hard after the Oklahoma State coach, and I think they thought they had him. And then there were some family issues apparently that made it impossible for him to come. But I believe that Malvo was next in line. I believe that was he was in it. I from the very start. Anytime I talked to anybody about possibilities, his name was one of them that I heard from the very beginning. He's a big time hitting coach. Apparently, he's hired a big time pitching coach. And I think he did tell me that he said he thought there were a lot of players with more potential, but with more potential than they had shown, and on the other returning players. So I think it was a good hire. I mean, you just can't. Everybody wants to hire some great head coach, but if you look at the SEC, there's not a single head coach in the SEC softball. I'm talking about SEC softball that was a proven I can win in the SEC guy. Not any of them. And Tim Walton certainly wasn't. Pat Murphy certainly wasn't. The lady at Arkansas wasn't. I think I ended up of the 12 coaches other than Auburn, four were like mid-major head coach. Were assistants, and 9 were like mid-major head coaches. So, as I said about other coaches, it's a crapshoot. But he seems to have all the, and from everything I'm told, players really love playing for them, both of them. And I know he told players that it's going to be different than what you're used to, and it's going to be really hard. And if that's a problem, then you might want to consider your options. And so far, I think just about, Annabelle Weech entered the portal before he was hired. And I think most of them will be back. So, but they need to sign. The biggest thing they only lost 2 position players of the players that were stars at the end of the season. They only lost 2, and that's Weidra and the center fielder Michaela Packer. But they obviously, they have pitchers coming back. They don't have anybody that's done much, and doesn't mean they won't. But they obviously need to go to the portal, get a couple of pitchers and a couple of other. And I'm sure they would like to get some more firepower on offense too. But he was impressive. That's all I can say. I still haven't met him. I told him I wanted to, when things slowed down, to sit down and do a story with him and his wife about how it all came about and about their whole softball journey. But which I will do. But also, I understand they're going to have a press conference, introductory press conference, maybe this week sometime, but I don't know when, or I don't think they know yet. So,
we'll wrap up with got one more question, then we'll wrap up this week. But we've talked about money and the state of college athletics and all those things. Let's talk about buyout money. Athletic buyouts aside, just football coaches. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Tupperville was what, 5? Chiswick was 15. Malzahn was what, 25, and Harson was 15. Is that
I didn't think. I was thinking Chiswick was like 10, but I could be wrong. Yeah, of course, and I think that. And here's the thing: I don't know how you put the genie back in the bottle, because it's easy to say, well, they're going to have to stop paying head coaches so much, or stop with the buyouts. But you have to win, and if this is the guy you believe is the guy, then you're going to do what it takes to get him. And but buyouts. I do think there's somewhat of a misnomer about buyouts. If there were no buyouts in the contract, then they would owe the entire contract. That's really the reason for buyouts. And if you try to put in there that we can fire you anytime we want to, nobody you want's gonna come probably. So I don't know what the answer is. When are we going to talk about my buyout? That's what I was
wondering. we don't want to give you a buyout. We want you to be around here as long as you want to be around.
Well, here's the thing. And I've always said this. I figure if I was a football coach and I had got a contract with a $15 or $20 million or whatever buyout, I'm afraid I would turn completely worthless almost immediately. Just think how much Gus Malzahn has made.
And continues to make.
Oh, I know. And I remember when he was a head coach at Springdale High School. But I have much. I remember, Terry was pleaded with and finally got Auburn to give him the rest of what he was owed, which was $600,000.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the difference is now all the media rights and all that stuff are all rolled in together. At that time, you were making a university salary, and then then the other stuff was separate. So what you got paid if you left was the remainder of your university salary. So
Different day.
yeah, I'll tell you, ever since, and I don't say this in any spiteful or even critical way, but when Alabama gave Nick Saban a $4 million guaranteed contract, 5 years or 4 years or whatever it was, at $4 million a year, everything changed. Was that was $4 million in 2007, and it just that was more than now. But I mean, but now obviously you got. I mean, how much does Brian Kelly, who to my knowledge has never won a championship? I mean, he's making what, $12-15 million a year.
Yeah, he won the lower level, but certainly not. Played a couple of championship games at Notre Dame, but
yeah, yeah. The one championship game I remember watching him play at Notre Dame was against Alabama, and they were completely overmatched.
Yeah, it wasn't much of a game.
Oh, the Notre Dame linebacker, what was his name that got
Manti Te'o.
catfished?
Yeah, Manti Te'o.
Yeah, he was not good that day.
No, he was not. I think it was 21-0 at the end of the first quarter. But, well, I think maybe we can go ahead and call it there, guys. We've been going for over an hour now, but we've got a lot of good stuff to get to next week and moving forward. And I know our listeners really appreciated it. So, Phillip, thanks so much for sharing with us on the first Friday with Phillip.
I enjoyed it. It's maybe next week we'll focus a little more on the here and now.
Sure.
And what's going on now, and as opposed to all the stories I've witnessed and seen, and some that can't be told. But
hey, I mean, Ronnie, you ran that survey. A lot of the people who come to our site are older, and so I mean, they've probably enjoyed hearing about.
What are you saying? What are you saying, Nate?
It's data. This is factual. It's data.
Well, I don't think it's just the.
I freely acknowledge being old.
Well, I don't think it's just the older crowd that enjoys the stories. I think I certainly enjoy them, and I know that that a lot of the comments that I got after that survey we ran, there were a lot of people that love reading your musings and all the things that you put up on the site. I know that
it's funny about that, and that you as a columnist, you like to think you can write well written, well researched, whatever columns, but what people really like the most, like it or not, what people really like the most is those things that are what we used to call a notes column. That's what they like the most. That's but hey, it's when used to be when I'd ask Brother Oliver, I say, "How you doing?" He'd say, "Still on top of the dirt. I'm doing good." Well, that's me. I'm still on top of the dirt as of tonight.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of Phillip when I first started working here. Keith one time told me, he said, I think it's funny that people think I'm not a good writer. He said, people will say that I just kind of throw stuff on there. He said, I worked at a newspaper for this long. He said, that's what people like. He said, people like to read stuff quickly and to have concise notes. He was like, yeah. He said, I think it's funny. He said, I just don't say anything and people don't think I'm a good writer.
Well, I think that's particularly true in something like what he does. I do still think there's a place for in-depth kinds of stories, and you've done a few good ones yourself, or several good ones yourself, Nathan. And but I think you have to have a mixture, and I think we've done a good job. Christian's done a fantastic job of covering recruiting. And Christian and Jason, I shouldn't leave them out, but and I think they've had kind of a mix of that. They've had some good stories, and they've also kept people. People want to know what they are that they can find out what's going on, and I think we've done a pretty good job of telling them that in most things.
It's been fast paced this summer, and it's just going to keep on going.
Man, that's another thing that's just unbelievable to me. I mean, recruiting used to basically be condensed into the end of the season until signing day. I mean, in June, all the coaches vanished.
Mm-hmm.
They vanished in June. You couldn't find them. And man, it's a nonstop deal now.
Yeah. Well, I will say it's also, and then we'll get out of here. But we were talking about it on Sunday. I think some of this comes from Auburn staff. Well, a lot of it, I think, comes from the staff and sort of their attitude under Freeze. But I remember very vividly being a senior in college, and when I worked at Rivals, it was just me and Mark Murphy were there for an official visit weekend. Or Tank Bigsby was visiting. Chris Thompson, who was here, is a safety, and they transferred to USC. I can't remember who else, but we went 4 for 4 on the players who visited, not declining interviews, not backing out the back door, to avoid us. And I remember Mark telling me that was huge. He said 4 for 4. That's a huge weekend. I can't believe we got everybody. Well, we went 8 for 8 on Sunday.
Yeah,
so things have changed a little
bit. Unbelievable job, and you're right. The coaching staff has a lot be, if not helpful, at least not getting in the way. Yeah, we can talk about that some next week if you want to. These guys are relentless, this coaching staff. So, but anyway, I've enjoyed being with you guys always. And,
yes, sir.
We'll do it again.
Sounds good. We'll see you next week, though.